Welcome to Zonie Living, Business, Adventure, and Leadership. Today we're going from the pioneer age to the space age. We've got ranching, renewables, and rovers all together, all at once, all in the same place, across Babbitt ranches of northern Arizona. We'll meet the person heading up all of these programs. That's Billy Cardoso, a fourth-generation member of the legendary Arizona Babbitt family. Among other projects, he's created a unique model for protecting golden eagles. And speaking of things that fly, we'll also be talking about astronauts and Flagstaff's continuous role in the space program. We'll connect with U.S. Geological Survey research geologist Jim Skinner and find out why astronauts on Babbitt ranches are working in the dark. First up is Billy Cardoso, coming to us from the historic Babbitt building in downtown Flagstaff. Hey there, Billy.
Hi, Bonnie. It's sure great to visit with you.
It's great to see you, and thanks so much for spending time with us. You've got a lot going out there on the open rangeland north of Flagstaff, and for anybody who doesn't know, that's 750,000 acres north of Flagstaff. Babbitt Ranches also was just inducted into the Arizona Farming and Ranching Hall of Fame. That must feel pretty good.
Well, it's an honor and a responsibility, and don't take either one of those lightly. And certainly on behalf of the Babbitt family and the broader Babbitt Ranches community, you know, it is special, and it's really terrific to really get the opportunity to admire and appreciate so many others throughout history that you know, also been acknowledged for their work in agriculture and in ranching across the state of Arizona.
You know, we talked about ranching, but we also have a lot of other things that are happening out there. And one of the new big project are the renewable energy projects. We have NextEra working with you, and we have Clenera working with you. Do you want to say a few words? I know the wind power project is just starting to take some shape out there on the ranch.
Yeah. Well, look, for the Babbitt Ranches community to get to participate in any efforts associated with renewable energy is really just inspiring. It means a lot to us. It means a lot that we're participating in something bigger than ourselves, something that we can pass on to the next generation, and something to be a part of today, you know, across our landscape of Babbitt Ranches. And by the way, these companies that we are working with are outstanding, and certainly can't say enough about all of them.
Right. And we've also got Clenera. We're working with APS and also Salt River Project with the power purchase agreements. So this is just really big. And I think one of the amazing things, Billy, is that it's not changing the landscape in any way. And anything that you've got going, like cattle ranching, is going to be occurring all at the same time.
Exactly. You know, this is a very comprehensive effort on behalf of the Babbitt Ranches community. It does include both wind and solar. It includes multiple developers, but it also kind of has maybe what I'll call a vertical integrated framework where it starts with the land. We're looking at habitat, for example, rabbits, prairie dogs, because they feed golden eagles. Looking at where golden eagles nest and breed and raise their young, to, you know, the Arizona Trail, which goes from the south to the north through one of the ranches of Seal Bar, where the renewable energy will be going. And then, of course, we have the cattle ranch with agriculture fully in place across Babbitt Ranches, as it has for pushing 137 years right now. And then, you know, really ultimately, this is going to allow for an enormous amount of research, a lot of education and participation from the broader community.
And you also talk about doing something for the planet and making decisions for the next generations and years to come after that. And I think that's just really fantastic. You've also created the SP Crater Golden Eagle Conservation Complex. You've identified several golden eagle territories on Babbitt ranches in the last decade that you've been studying. And you know, the golden eagles, well, we can see them in these game camera images that you've been taking and the researchers have been using. And some of these are so fantastic. We get to see the eagles come down on deer carcasses that have been moved there by the researchers so they can study them. And tell us a little bit about this complex. This is really something that could be a national model.
Well, right, it certainly could. But we're starting from scratch and have a great plan to move forward. And it starts with the information that has been collected well over 10 years in this area regarding the golden eagle and all the needs associated with the golden eagle. What we found is that over those years, the main variables that were influencing the overall health of the golden eagle really fell into three areas. One was the recreational activity and causing some disturbance during the breeding and incubating stages of the egg and then the fledging of the eaglets. So that was number one, and really that's something that we can do something about and limit the recreational access during certain times of the year from January through May in that area. The second was really, one that has been talked about largely for many, many years, and that is lead in ammunition, in remaining in carcasses after they've been shot. And so, the animals will eat that and it does cause them some problems. So eliminating lead in the area has been very important. And the third was the shooting of the prey base. And the reason for that is because as long as there's a solid prey base and a healthy population of rabbits, prairie dogs, other rodents, and so on, then the eagles have the food they need in order to, to raise their young. So these were the three main areas. But ultimately, this is about learning and understanding about a whole complex and a whole ecosystem in that area, and really how we participate in that for the future.
Well, Billy, I also know, in having our conversations with the wildlife researchers out there, that these eagles and staying on the nest, they're so skittish. So if there's recreationists in the area, there's a good chance it might scare them off the nest. And from what I understand, those eggs can't survive for very long at all without the parent eagles there. Also, the hatchlings, they don't get their down covering to keep them warm for about 3 or so weeks. So this is really a big deal. And that time period, that's from January through May. And will that be an ongoing thing?
Yeah, so right now, this is going to be a 4-year basic demonstration, not really an experience, more of a demonstration. And what is really special ultimately about this project is that it combines the efforts of so many other folks, in particular the Arizona Game and Fish Department, along with the Arizona State Land Department. And that's always a super thing to see. And for the Babbitt Ranches community to participate with them is a real honor there as well.
Yeah, what a unique opportunity.
Yeah.
I also want to talk about pronghorn. I know this is near and dear to your heart and the pronghorn corridors. So you personally have been studying pronghorn, and what a beautiful symbol of the West. And you've been studying them for more than 30 years. You've studied their behavior, how they move across the landscape. And as a result of that, you invented a thing called the goat bar, which is really fascinating to me, because now we find that all over the West, including Canada. And I'm sure a lot of folks out there have no idea where they came from. So I'd love it if you'd share a little story about how your relationship with the pronghorn.
Well, terrific. I'll tell you, it has been very dear to me to learn and understand about pronghorn in all aspects of their lives. And along with that, to get to participate with so many awesome scientists and research and biologists who know a lot more about pronghorn than I do, and to learn from them and just to share the journey of learning about pronghorn all together. It's been a really big deal. And along with that, it was more about, okay, with pronghorn, what is it that we're doing on Babbitt ranches, for example, that may be having a direct negative impact on the animals and their livelihoods? Fence lines certainly seem to be front and center. Pronghorn traditionally don't want to jump over a fence. They would rather go underneath if that's possible. And so, really, it just seemed like, well, okay, if we were to take a piece of PVC pipe and put it on that lower wire, raise it up about to 18 inches or so, tie it to the wire above it, or however you could get it up off the ground. Really, the pronghorn had plenty of room to go underneath the fence lines, and it didn't have any direct impacts on the cattle operation. And so that was a real big breakthrough for us, not only into demonstrating our sense of responsibility and obligation, and ultimately accountability for, decreasing or minimizing our impact on the pronghorn, but what it also did was really broaden the awareness of all kinds of impacts that we may have across the landscape with regard to wildlife. And really, ultimately, what it did is brought a lot of folks out who got to be together and really absorb this ethic.
Right, and give a lot of people an opportunity to participate out there.
Yep.
And so I know you've got those goat bars across miles and miles of Babbitt ranches. And the ranch also, I wanted to talk about this because this is so fascinating, has been instrumental in returning the very endangered black-footed ferret to the grassland. And that's on SB Ranch of Babbitt Ranches.
Yeah, that's correct. And, along with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Arizona Game and Fish Department and some other nonprofits, for Babbitt Ranches to participate in the release of the North America's #1 endangered mammal species, the black-footed ferret, really is again, it's just remarkable to get to participate in such an activity as that. But it really demonstrates kind of just this underlying very powerful ethic that the Babbitt Ranches community has in supporting these healthy ecosystems, these healthy landscapes. And the black-footed ferret, I mean, it really did demonstrate that commitment that Babbitt Ranches has to the landscape.
And in addition, we're looking at this beautiful site. This is Cataract Canyon. So we're talking about landscape scale conservation all the time. This is south of the Grand Canyon and just a gorgeous place. So Babbitt Ranches, I just want everyone to know, has put some 40,000 acres into a conservation easement that sets aside this beautiful land like this for open space in perpetuity. And that was a big, fantastic decision with the Babbitt Ranches family and the Babbitt Ranches community. Just that must feel really good.
Well, it really does. And again, it reflects the commitment that they have to a very long term. And really, what is the gift to the next generation going to be? And what are the opportunities that they will have, to pursue their passions and their dreams for this landscape. And, by the way, Nature Conservancy was very instrumental in assisting in getting that conservation easement on the cataract, along with Coconino County, who really made it, in the end, possible for us to accomplish that donation and hold that land in perpetuity as open space and allow for so much of this really wonderful land to be protected in perpetuity.
That's just amazing. Well, we should remind everyone that with all this going on, this is a working cattle ranch, and the Babbitt family is very much a part of the agriculture industry and has been since 1886. Talk about that a little bit, Billy, would you?
Well, really, in 1884, there were 5 brothers who were running a grocery store and butcher shop, a few other things as well, in Cincinnati, Ohio. These were young guys who had lost their parents and a sister to an illness that swept through that town in those days. And they just really weren't sure where their future was going to lead them until one day a fellow showed up there at their shop and had some brochures about all the opportunities out west. And that's where everybody should be heading and looking for their futures. Well, these guys bit the bug, and they explored for about 2 years around the western United States for exactly that, a cattle ranch. They had made a strong determination that their future was going to be in livestock. And it ended up in April of 1886. They showed up in Flagstaff. They got off the train, and they were not too thrilled with where the location, in that it had just burned down weeks earlier. There wasn't much of a town here, and they didn't know anybody really in town that they could visit with. But certain things happened, as they do when fortune's going to come your way, and they took advantage of some really terrific opportunities, meeting people and then pursuing the acquisition of cattle and ultimately some land And ever since then, there truly has just been a real passion for participating in agriculture.
And you know, that passion continues, and I love how you invite the public out every
Yeah,
July to come
yeah,
out to the cult sale. And that
yeah,
that is just a really beautiful event. And you know, it gives, what I hear from people talking about is that it allows everybody to have a step back to the values and the feel of the Old West. And they can see the cowboys and they can see these beautiful horses come into the arena. And it's an auction, but it's never really about the auction, is it?
no, it's not. Although I will tell you that the folks who are involved with the breeding program on Babbitt ranches are extraordinary at what they do. And the horses are absolutely outstanding. And if anybody's ever interested in coming out and seeing the colt sale, it's the second Saturday of July every year out at Spiderweb, just north of Flagstaff. And it's fun. It's very easy and everybody is welcome. But as you suggest, it really is about the community and bringing the community together. At the heart of Babbitt Ranches is that community, that sense of community, and that is fully reflected in our colt sale for what we do all year long and why. We call this cowboy essence, and it's basically the principles, the values, the character qualities that really we all aspire to, to become the most that we're capable of becoming. And the cowboy culture's, kind of had that as a reflection of that culture for ever since it started. Handshake deals, having trust, in other people and respect, in your neighbors and your family, and so on and so on. And anyhow, so at the colt sale, we definitely try to reflect that for everybody and pass it on.
Well, boy, I know from first person experience that you really do feel that. You feel like you're
Yeah,
part of the family and you feel that goodness and just purity. It's just wonderful to be outdoors and see these beautiful
yeah,
animals and feel like you're connected to all these folks. Well, you
yeah,
also have some of the darkest skies in Arizona. You've
yeah,
been measuring the darkness of the amazing starry nights, and
yeah,
Babbitt Ranches currently is seeking the designation as an International Dark Sky Reserve, which
yeah,
makes so much sense because you're sort of nestled in this dark sky area. You've got
yeah,
the first international dark sky city of Flagstaff.
yeah,
Just south of you, you've got the Grand Canyon National Park. To the
yeah.
north, you've got Wapatki National Monument and all these other amazing places. So I know that is near and dear to your heart, too.
Oh my goodness. I mean, in the end, it's definitely one thing that all over the world we can all relate to, and that's looking up at the sky at night. And ever since I was little, I just remember being, captivated sometimes by how incredibly brilliant and beautiful, the night sky is, and how it just kind of draws out of you, whether you want it to or not.
It's
This
mesmerizing,
inspiration,
isn't it?
this,
Yeah.
this, this, this intrigue, this wonder. And I think that's a really big part of who all of us are. And I think it's a massive part of how we all are connected. And so, for Babbitts to be able to participate in preserving these dark skies, and doing our part, especially to provide that to the next generation, and for multiple generations, for however long after that, that they would be able to at night look up and really just cast their dreams and wonders afar to really be inspired.
It certainly is powerful. And
Yeah,
while we're talking about the sky, we should mention that the rocky terrain up there in northern Arizona is similar to the surface of the moon. And that's important because Babbitt Ranches has played an important role in the history of the space program. So you've been
yeah,
working with NASA engineers and
yeah,
astronauts and the U.S. Geological Survey Astrogeology Science Center at places
yeah,
like SP Crater and Black
yeah.
Point Lava Flow and other places. And this has been going on since the 1960s with the Apollo moon missions.
That's right. Yeah, sure. Ever since I've grown up, I was little. I've known in those days in particular was the Apollo missions. And it was a big deal to, hear that there were the astronauts or the Mars, rover or something, cruising around out on Babbitts, and of
Mhm.
course other areas in northern Arizona as well, but certainly out on Babbitts. And even as a kid, wow, you'd see those rockets go up, and it was a big deal for all of us. Since then, the NASA and JPL and other organizations, along with USGS, have been, continuing to use those lands for, science and testing their equipment, and and just innovating the next journeys to the moon and to Mars. And to see the rover that went to Mars, basically, out on CO bar, really was something else. And that was before they were sent up to Mars and started cruising around there. And but to see these habitats, that in the old days they had a little vehicle that would cruise around the moon, and they leave their module and go out for a little picnic, somewhere with their rover, but they'd have to come back and then sleep in the lunar module at night.
Yeah.
And now what they're doing, of course, which is just so cool to see, is they're basically building RVs so that they can just stay in them and go cruise all around the lunar surface and do their testing and exploration and stay wherever they are, kind of make more of a road trip out of it, and then show back up at home. So it's really cool to see what they look like and how they're designing them, and to visit with the folks that are involved. Shoot, it's cool.
It is really cool. Well, last fall, I know you'll remember, scientists and engineers from Carnegie Mellon, the Planetary Science Institute, the USGS, were all out there on Babbitt Ranches testing a rover prototype. And you'll remember her name was Zoe. And of course, Zoe is Greek for life, we've learned. And so tell us about that experience. That was pretty fun.
Well, first off, I think that, along with the topic, that these folks are all engineers trying to develop the next generation of exploration on the moon or on Mars. That's just really takes your imagination away right there. But I think what I would want to say about meeting up with those folks is just, even individually and collectively, how passionate they are about the things that they do in order for something so much bigger than themselves to happen, and actually, participating with everybody designing rockets and the mission controls and all the logistics that, I have probably no idea how much goes into actually the success of these missions for example, Mars. And here they are testing the very things that are so important once those rovers are on Mars, for example, simply being able to make powder out of a little piece of rock and collect that dust, and then be able to analyze it, send it back to Earth through space, and and then they collect that data and then be able to analyze it, and get information from this, and to see that in them, and in their commitment, and just that joy that they have in what they do, really inspired me.
Oh, yeah. Well, we have a video clip from fall 2021. We want to take everyone out to the scene where we can see the rover in action. So we'll first hear from Eldar No Way with the Planetary Science Institute, and then we'll hear from David Wettergreen with Carnegie Mellon. And he is the creator of Zoe. So both of them will tell us how they're making robot rovers smarter. This is really sci-fi stuff. And how Zoe is learning to make decisions on her own. Basically, how robot rovers of the future will be able to think for themselves. So here we'll give a listen to Eldar.
Sure. So when we see Hollywood movies, we're actually see a rover that gets sent out to do basically to do science or to explore. And once in a while reports to the team and says, hey guys, I'm out here and I discovered this, or something like that. The rover is never, remote controlled to a place. The rover kind of knows what it's doing. It knows what analysis to do and so on. In reality, that's not how rovers work on other planets. Right now, we're basically joysticking rovers. We basically tell them, okay, we want you to move 10 feet forward. Move 10 feet forward. And at the next uplink, or the next day, practically, we tell the rover, oh, that rock is interesting. Rover, we want you to move 2 meters to that rock. In the next uplink, we tell it, rover, we want you to extend that arm and place this instrument down on that rock. The next time, oh, rover, that looks good. We want you to perform a measurement. And this goes on and on. So every single action of the rover is commanded from the Earth by the operators, and it's a step-by-step process where the rover is just a dumb machine. That it has the ability to avoid certain obstacles, but beyond that, it doesn't know what it's doing. Basically, you have to tell them every single step of the way. So what we're trying to do here is make the rover a little smarter. Basically, we feed the rover a set of ideas, of hypotheses. We give it a map of the area, and we tell it where we think are, for example, in this case, the geological history. We think these areas are, ancient marine deposits. We think these areas are volcanic deposits, and so on. And then we tell the rover, now go explore.
Now we get to see the rover and hear the sounds that are making. Do you remember this? This was so fun.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And then, of course, we've got cattle out there on the range as well. And this is all going on at the same time. So it makes you wonder what they're thinking when they're sitting up there watching this contraption go through.
There's two sets
And
of
here we've got
cameras there.
David and you, Billy.
These are two that we use for navigation. So it's looking out ahead and building a model of the terrain to decide where to steer to avoid obstacles. This is a laser scanner. And it scans and just measures range to points. It's sort of like I don't know if your car has those bumpers that gives the warning when you get close to stuff. Same idea here.
Oh, okay.
And then the sensors up here are for the science. So there's a pair of cameras on the outside there, very narrow field of view, very high resolution, so they can look at individual rocks out there. And there's a pair of them so you can build a 3D model just like with your eyes. This thing in the middle is a spectrometer. So what it does is it's a single pixel, but that single pixel, instead of being RGB like your regular camera, is actually one of 2,500 different wavelengths. So you measure this kind of continuous signal, and the scientists can then interpret that to detect chlorophyll, for example, because that color gets absorbed in a particular way, or there's iron out there, you can see what are the iron-bearing minerals, so they can actually do mineralogy with that. Wow. And then buried inside is one more instrument.
These guys are pioneering something that's somewhat uncertain and wide open as far as the opportunities for them to journey and explore through it. And you could see it in them. I mean, just I'll tell you, I've throughout my life have probably missed how grateful we should be for these folks who are like out on Babbitt ranches. Simply going through wiring and doing very, these tasks and testing all this equipment, because by the time we really do see it, blasting off and images, coming back from Mars, with the rover doing something, and we just go, wow, look at how cool that is. There are so many people whose absolute heart is in the middle of every detail of this exploration, in this case of Mars with these rovers.
Boy, and really moving us all into this next level and coming up with inventions that help our lives and improve our quality of life. It's just really incredible. Well, I know through all of these amazing adventures, the most important part of all of it for you is the relationships that the Babbitt Ranches community has with these scientists, with these wildlife managers and other organizations, and also with the environment. That's really important to you.
Oh man, well, I'll tell you, thank you, Bonnie. It is, and to the rest of the Babbitt Ranches community as well. I think all of us from various perspectives have been kind of brought up, raised, bred with that in us, and very grateful for all the folks throughout history that have got us to where we are today. But where we are today is that we really do have a real deep sense that it starts through learning and understanding our efforts, and that it is through that we become better able to join, share, and to be good participants in our community and in the efforts that we're a part of. I certainly can't say enough about relationships. I truly believe in the end, that's all there is, whether it's with yourself, with your family and friends, or with others, and even with the environment. It ultimately is going to be about relationships, and it really does fuel who I am.
So inspirational, Billy. Well, we only touched on a few of the many projects that you have going on at Babbitt Ranches. Next time we'll have to talk about recreation in the Babbitt's Arizona Nordic Village, along with mountain biking and the Stagecoach Line Ultra and the many races you have out there. Yeah. Well, we so appreciate your time today and hope that you will come back to share more on Zonie Living. Thank you so much, Billy.
You bet. Best wishes to you. Thank you.
Thank you. You can hear more from Billy Cardoso, President and General Manager of Babbitt Ranches, on his Discovery with Babbitt Ranches podcast, recorded from the Hash Knife Studio in the historic Babbitt Building in downtown Flagstaff. Also, you can find more information at BabbittRanches.com. We've talked a little bit about space exploration, and a critical player in America's space journey has been and continues to be the U.S. Geological Survey in Flagstaff. Joining us now is USGS research geologist Jim Skinner. Hi, Jim.
Hey, Bonnie, how are you doing?
I am doing really great and so wonderful to have you here. I want to let everyone know that the USGS is the #1 map maker in the world. So you head up the team that makes maps for the moon and other planets. And I can't stress how important this job is. The USGS has been mapping the surface of the moon and planets since the 1960s Apollo moon missions.
That's right, Bonnie. Yeah. So one of the things that the U.S. Geological Survey does in Flagstaff, Arizona, is the whole reason that we're in Flagstaff is that we were there to support the Apollo missions. And one of the things that we were doing back in the early 60s, from the immediate time that they came from California and set up shop here in Flagstaff, was to make geologic maps. And so we, at the USGS here in astrogeology, we make geologic maps for other planets. The USGS is making maps for Earth and for a lot of terrestrial sites. And so the Astrogeology Science Center here in Flagstaff, Arizona, we are making the geologic maps that are going to assist people going to the moon and beyond. So yeah, we are one of the only facilities in the world that is making these specific kinds of maps. They're very standardized. They're very specific. We follow a lot of rules. They take a long time to get out. And yeah, we are proud to be the kind of the geologic mapping representative to produce those products for the world.
So bringing the USGS to Flagstaff had a lot to do with Gene Shoemaker, and I know he's been called the father of astrogeology. I'm not sure everybody knows Gene Shoemaker these days. So Jim, can you give a little bit of an introduction?
Yeah, so I unfortunately was never able to meet Gene, but Gene Shoemaker was at the USGS and doing geologic mapping before he started to pound down the doors in Congress when the Apollo missions were ramping up. And basically what they were saying, Gene and some other of his cohorts, were that we're going to go to this place. We need to be doing some kind of science while we're there. The Apollo missions were very technical. They were very political. And so he was making the argument that once we go there, we need to be doing some kind of science and return some kind of science. And so he and some of his cohorts got in charge of making the geologic maps, doing site selections, training the astronauts, and making sure that we were able to squeeze some science out of these terrific missions that were really dangerous and really happening fairly quickly. And they did a really good job of getting everything lined up and working with NASA and Johnson Space Center and getting everything dialed in. And so, yeah, that's what they did. They came out here in the late 50s and early 60s and set up astrogeology, and we are continuing that good work today.
And Flagstaff became a great site for this kind of work. And you were telling me some of the reasons about that, including the dark skies.
Yeah, so the dark skies is one of the key things because we're so high elevation, around 7,000 feet. The atmosphere here is much thinner than it would be down at sea level. And because of that, we get colder, as everybody who's visited here probably knows. Even in the summertime, it's really cool. It's nice. But those dark skies were one of the key things. And so a lot of the telescopic observations that were made early on before we had orbiters around the moon, the geologic maps and the site characterizations and our understanding about the moon was made from those telescopic observations. And those were coming from Flagstaff. And so along with that, Gene recognized that a lot of the sites up here are really good for training. They're scientific sites. We have a lot of different kinds of lava flows. They're pretty young. We have meteor craters and impact craters. So there's lots of different sites that are easily accessible, good for transporting material and people and equipment and technology out into the field and testing those things. And that's what they started doing in the very beginning when they came in the early 60s, all the way through the Apollo missions. And that's what we're ramping up and starting to do right now.
So exciting. And I know that Gene Shoemaker, from what I heard, wanted to be an astronaut. He never did make it to the moon, except his ashes now are the only human ashes up on the moon.
That's exactly right. And yes,
tribute.
he was a terrific man. He was kind of a stalwart of the science. Very proud to be working in a building that's named after him. And I feel like we in USGS and in the planetary science community are really standing on the shoulders of giants. And he was certainly one of them. We have some great old photos of them training folks and one of the things that we had seen and some of the pictures that we have is Gene in a mock-up of the Apollo spacesuits, and that's always fun to see.
Yeah, I love that shot. And, speaking of giants, I love this picture of Neil Armstrong as he is visiting the Grand Canyon. And we know that all the astronauts who've ever walked on the moon have walked in Flagstaff first.
That's absolutely right. So all the training that was done for all the Apollo astronauts was done in and around Flagstaff. And so it's a point of pride for the people that live in Flagstaff, and it's certainly a point of pride for the people that work at the U.S. Geological Survey as well as Lowell. It's something that we can be really proud of. And yes, that picture of Neil going down into the canyon and seeing that picture along with all the other pictures of training is just really inspirational, because one of the things that they were doing, they being Gene and Dave Roddy and a lot of the folks that work with them, were training these pilots essentially to be geologists. And they knew that once they got to the moon, they needed to be able to act like geologists. They needed to be able to pick up rocks and identify those materials and take appropriate samples, because they had very limited volume and space to take back the samples. So they had to be very well selected and documented. So yeah, it's really nice to see some of these historical photos. And often we find ourselves just kind of going back through the boxes and looking at some of these archival images, because it's inspirational. What they were doing then set the groundwork for a lot of the work that was happening over the next 50 years. And we're actually going back through and reading some of these older documents as we start to ramp up training and working with NASA crews to try to get back to the moon.
When you mention these older pictures, I can feel the excitement looking in their eyes. I mean, I feel like they were having such a good time training and just so excited to make this happen, which was phenomenal. I think it's also important to note that engineers and technicians have been testing space buggies and equipment and spacesuits for decades in northern Arizona. And you're involved with the desert rats, and rats means research and technology studies, for anyone who doesn't know that. And around 2010 was really my favorite time for space exploration in my lifetime in northern Arizona, because NASA was testing a very interesting space buggy out on Babbitt ranches. We've got a picture of it here, and I want everyone to look closely at the back end of this vehicle, and you'll see the spacesuits. Those are actual spacesuits attached. I think it's called a suit port. And the idea was the astronauts would be inside the vehicle. They would step into these suits. This is very Lost in Space kind of action. And they would go from inside the buggy and disconnect through these suits, and then be able to leave the space buggy and go explore. So you were out there, and did this contraption work?
Yes, that's really interesting. And so the DRATS, like Bonnie said, this Desert Research and Technology Studies group, is just out of Johnson Space Center. It's really interesting because what they're doing is testing out all the technology, from the rovers to the suits, to the communication, to getting in and out of these buggies and these devices that they will use to move across the surface. And so, yes, they did work. And what it was a way to just test those things out and make sure that they were going to work, and then redesign and readapt as they figured out what they needed. It was very interesting to be out there because speaking with Billy Cardoso beforehand, it was Babbitt ranches that we were operating on, and it was a giant setup. I mean, it lasted about a month that we were out there, and we went all the way from one side of this major road that north of Flagstaff to the other side. And it was a 2-week long technology demonstration. There were 2 buggies, they were identical to each other, and there were 2 people that were within each of those buggies. And they spent the entirety of the time for 2 weeks within those buggies. They did not get out. When they did get out, they were putting themselves into a spacesuit, as Bonnie noted, and then they were pulling themselves out and walking around the surface. They were timed. The traverses were very well documented. We pretended like we had a science back room, and we also had a kind of a mission control. We were working out of sea vans at a Black Point lava flow. And so it was a full mock-up of the way that we would be performing these kinds of missions moving forward. And like I said before, this is a way for us to assess how things were working together, the science part of it, the technology component of it, all the different communications between the science backroom and mission control, communication between mission control and the astronauts that were in those buggies. So it really was something that is absolutely required before we go venture off beyond low Earth orbit anymore. We need to know how these things are working together. We need to know how everybody in the background can work together. It is really a team building effort, and there's so many people and so many moving parts. So it was an honor to be associated with that 2009, 2010, 2011 desert rat studies, and we are looking forward to participating as that moves forward.
Well, that was a serious dress rehearsal, as you mentioned. And so now NASA and USGS and everyone involved in the space exploration program is getting pretty excited about the Artemis missions. And there's a lot of activity going on right now. For example, you told me, Jim, that out on the ground map making training is happening soon. And it's absolutely crucial because you want the map makers to see how closely features out on the ground align with the satellite information that they're receiving. And that helps them be better at what they do.
That's absolutely right, Bonnie. I cannot stress this enough. And certainly I'm biased because my business is to make geologic maps of other bodies beyond Earth. But I think that it's one of the critical pieces of context that we have for understanding other bodies. So yes, it is important to have not only the astronauts, but the NASA engineers and managers come out and see what it looks like to be on the ground and to conduct geologic mapping, to conduct sample analysis, to walk up onto a rock outcrop and to break off a piece and look at it and study it and understand what it means in the context of the geologic map that has been made and is being adapted while you're on the surface. So yes, we have a lot of upcoming things that are happening. Artemis 1 is going through what's called a wet dress rehearsal right now, which is rolling the rocket out to the launch pad. And it has been going through the testing phase. So Artemis 1 will be an unmanned launch. Artemis 2 will be a manned launch around the moon and back. And then Artemis 3, hopefully in 2025 and 2026, we'll put 2 people on the surface of the moon again. And those will be in the south pole of the moon. And yeah, so it's a really important part of this is to understand how we look at images that are remote, so obtained by satellites, and how those actually match up and convey information on the ground. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out how we can access that information and how we can understand the geology without actually going to the surface and doing mapping like we would on Earth.
You know, I get chills all over again just hearing you describe, the Artemis missions and going back and putting humans on the moon. And of course, the likely places that they're going to be, as we've discussed, is the lunar South Pole. And that's because of you, as you've told me, they'll be looking for signs of water. And the lunar South Pole doesn't get a lot of sun, so there might be ice in those craters. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a fascinating bit of it. So all of the other Apollo missions that went to the surface were focused on these kind of equatorial regions on the near side of the moon. And to remind everybody that we are seeing the same side of the moon all the time.
Right.
We don't see the back side of the moon. We have observed it because we have orbiters that have gone around and taking pictures. But we only see from Earth this one side of the moon. And so it's easy to communicate from here to that side of the moon. But as NASA starts to go into these more evolved missions where we have a sustained presence on and around the moon, beginning with Artemis, yes, the site that they are leaning towards seems to be this lunar South Pole where there is permanently shadowed regions on PSRs, and that's places where in crater rims, which you can imagine are pretty steep, and that the sun is just not getting to. And in those places, despite the fact that there is no atmosphere on the moon, there is some indication that there is ice in and around the subsurface of those kind of permanently shadowed regions. So the point here would be to train the astronauts when they're going back to be in those environments. And those environments mean that there's not going to be a lot of sunlight, or the sunlight that they will have will be at a very low angle. And that means that they will be operating within shadow. And that means all kinds of things for safety as well as observation and documentation. So there's a whole different way of going about assessing whether this can be done and ensuring the safety of the boots on the ground, those people that we will be sending there. So there's a whole thing that needs to be happening to train how we understand people operating in low light conditions. And just to give you an example, in a very low angle lighting situation where you have rocks that may be a few centimeters tall, they will be casting shadows that are hundreds of meters long.
Whoa.
And so that's an amazing amount of darkness that we have,
Boy.
and they need to really understand how to deal with that.
So they have been testing in the dark out at Babbitt Ranches and other places in northern Arizona, and you were the one who told me about the portable sun that they've got out there, and again how critical it is that they can figure out what they're doing in the dark because they can't puncture their suits. It would be terrible if somebody tripped. I mean, it's just life and death out there. So tell us about that. We've got some really fascinating pictures that show the astronauts working out in the dark.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And we've been fortunate to help. This is kind of the new iteration of NASA Desert Rats. And so again, this is at Research and Technology Studies group that's coming out of Houston. And they are coming out here and we're helping them with the logistics for now. And what they're doing is they have what they were kind of affectionately calling this portable sun, which is essentially a giant spotlight that is mounted on the back of a pickup truck. And they're moving around at certain places on north of Flagstaff. Some of them are on Babbitt land, and Babbitt has been awfully gracious with letting us work with them and letting the NASA scientists and technicians come out and work with this. Yes, it's interesting. It's very dangerous what they will be doing. And so we're trying to learn how to communicate and how to allow people to migrate in between shadows and illumination, and what that means for safety. You said it, Bonnie, with you're trying to avoid puncturing a suit or doing something that's going to damage these folks. So yeah, there's a lot to do there, and it's been interesting to see them ramp up.
You know, Jim, it's difficult to believe that 50 years have gone by since our first moon landing, and the technology is so much better now.
It really is. And to watch these things happen and to be, at least from an outside perspective and helping with the logistics, it's a massive undertaking. And the people that are working on this are just really impressive, really good people. And they are in charge of a lot of cool things, all the way down to what do the astronauts need to pick up samples? Because it's a very dusty place. They don't want to handle the material with their gloves, and so they're trying to figure out tongs or scoops, and it's the same kinds of issues that were being addressed in Apollo. And so we're doing this all over again. We're learning a lot by digging out a lot of the Apollo training and testing material. And so it's really has been a long time, five and a half decades, and now we have to kind of reset, reboot. We don't want to start over. We want to learn from past experiences. And that's what we're doing right now, is really seeing what worked last time. And we have so much more, materials and an understanding about how to manufacture these materials and devices, that it's really an interesting time to be participating in this.
Boy, it is. It's so exciting. And finally, Jim, we hear a lot about space debris and what we're leaving out there. And so in your circles, is there a developing space ethic that's going on?
That's an interesting question, and I'm glad that you asked that. Yes, so from our level, which is a very low level in the community, this is something that is happening, this conversation about ethics on other bodies. We already talk about this when we send other rovers to other bodies. We don't want to contaminate the surface, so we have to make sure that it is as clean as possible. So yes, there is an ethics. And what I mean by low level, this is something that we would never be able to solve at our kind of level at the USGS here in Flagstaff. It's a really big conversation that is national and international.
For sure.
So yes, there is a communication. Yes, there is an effort to understand what we need to do, what the moral approach would be to be able to have a sustained presence on other bodies. And so, yes, it's an interesting question. What we can do at our level is to work with our collaborators, including Babbitt Ranches, and ensure that we are respecting the land. The land that we work on is a resource, and there are many, many fantastic things that we have to be able to access and view, but we also have to do it responsibly and ethically. And so we are having these conversations at our level, and other people are as well. And I think that there will be a kind of a sea change as we move forward, where there be documents in place on how we need to respond and how we need to act ethically as we start to explore off-world.
It sure is interesting that we're thinking about these conversations. Well, Jim, thank you for sharing your insight into the space program and all the work that you're doing and that USGS has been doing to get us to the moon and back. And I hope to see you out there in the lunar-like terrain of northern Arizona in the months to come.
Thanks, Bonnie. I really appreciate you having me, and we look forward to communicating with you moving forward and out there in Arizona.
Great fun talking with you today. Take good care, Jim.
You too.
And we'll be hearing more from Jim Skinner, research geologist with the USGS, and space training activity going on in northern Arizona. So keep watching for more in upcoming news at flagstaffbusinessnews.com and, of course, here too at Zonie Living. And I hope you were inspired today. Here are some of my takeaways. First off, relationships are everything with each other and with the environment. And it's important to have a good map to help you get to your destination, whether it's to the moon or somewhere else. This is Zonie Living, business, adventure, and leadership. I'm Bonnie Stevens.